Picture this. A modern person tosses and turns in their temperature-controlled bedroom, checking their phone for the third time tonight. Meanwhile, 1,000 years ago, 80 Vikings slept better than kings in a single wooden hall with no electricity, no heating, and winter darkness that lasted for months. How is that even possible? The answer lies buried in the frozen ground of Scandinavia, hidden in the ruins of longhouses and the stories carved in ancient stone. For over a century, archaeologists have been uncovering evidence of something extraordinary. The Vikings didn't just survive the harshest winters on Earth. They thrived in conditions that would break most modern humans. Their secret wasn't what you'd expect. In the winter of 875 CE, when the sun disappeared from the Norwegian sky for 3 solid months, Bjorn Ironside's clan gathered in their great hall. Outside, wolves howled and the wind cut through the darkness like a blade. Inside, children slept peacefully next to hardened warriors. Women rested beside their husbands. Even the elderly slept through the night without waking. No one was taking melatonin. No one had a white noise machine. No one even had a private bedroom. Yet they woke up refreshed, alert, and ready to raid England. What do they know that we don't? The first clue came from an unlikely place. In 1986, archaeologists digging near the Lofoten Islands in Norway uncovered something massive. A longhouse that stretched nearly 300 feet long. That's almost the length of a football field. Inside this single building, they found evidence that up to 80 people lived, ate, worked, and slept together. Dr. Birgitta Hard spent 5 years studying the sleeping areas. What she found changed everything scientists thought they knew about healthy sleep. The Norse didn't fight their environment, she discovered. They worked with it in ways we're only beginning to understand. The sleeping arrangements were unlike anything in the modern world. No private bedrooms, no individual beds. Instead, raised wooden platforms ran along both walls of the longhouse. These weren't just simple benches. They were carefully engineered for maximum comfort and warmth. Each platform stood exactly 18 inches off the ground. This wasn't random. Archaeological analysis shows this height kept sleepers away from cold drafts that swept across the floor. It also protected them from moisture that could seep up from the earth below. But here's where it gets interesting. The platforms were wide enough for entire families to sleep side by side. Mothers, fathers, children, and even grandparents shared the same sleeping space. To modern eyes, this might seem uncomfortable or even unsanitary. Science says otherwise. Recent studies in sleep laboratories have proven something the Vikings knew instinctively. When humans sleep close together, their bodies naturally regulate each other's temperature. Stress hormones like cortisol drop to optimal levels. Heart rates synchronize. Even breathing patterns align. Dr. Matthew Walker, one of the world's leading sleep researchers, put simply, social sleeping isn't primitive. It's optimal. The Vikings had stumbled onto one of the most effective sleep systems in human history. But they were just getting started. The positioning of each sleeping area wasn't left to chance. The most important family members, usually the clan leader and his wife, slept closest to the central fire pit. Their children slept next to them. Servants and slaves took spots further from the heat source. This wasn't just about social status. It was thermal engineering. Modern temperature analysis of reconstructed longhouses shows the sleeping areas closest to the fire stayed between 65 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit all night long. The areas further away dropped to around 55 degrees. This created natural temperature zones that matched each person's status and needs. But the Vikings weren't done optimizing their sleep system. Chemical analysis of soil samples from sleeping areas revealed something unexpected. The Norse scattered specific plants beneath their sleeping furs. Not just any plants. Lavender for relaxation. Chamomile for deeper sleep. Meadowsweet to ease aches and pains. These weren't decorations. They were medicine. As people moved and shifted during the night, they crushed the dried herbs beneath them. This released natural compounds that modern science has proven to promote better sleep. The Vikings had created a primitive but highly effective form of aromatherapy. All of this happened in complete darkness. No candles burning through the night. No torches flickering in the corners. Just a soft glow of banked coals in the central fire pit. While modern humans fight darkness with artificial light, the Vikings embraced it. They understood something we've forgotten. Darkness isn't the enemy of sleep. It's sleep's greatest ally. Their winter nights lasted up to 20 hours. Most people today can't imagine sleeping that long. But the Vikings didn't sleep straight through. They had discovered something that modern sleep science is only now rediscovering. They practiced what researchers call biphasic sleep, 2 separate sleep periods with a wakeful time in between. This wasn't insomnia or a sleep disorder. It was intentional and highly beneficial. Around midnight, many Vikings would naturally wake up. Instead of lying there worried about not sleeping, they used this time productively. Men would sharpen weapons, repair tools, or plan the next day's work. Women would spin wool, mend clothes, or tend to small children. This wakeful period lasted 1 to 2 hours. Then everyone would settle back into their furs for a second, deeper sleep that lasted until dawn. Modern sleep laboratories have proven this pattern produces the most restorative sleep possible. The first sleep period clears mental fatigue. The midnight wake time allows for creative thinking and problem solving. The second sleep period is when the deepest healing and memory formation occurs. The Vikings had accidentally discovered the perfect sleep schedule, but their sleep mastery went even deeper than that. The Vikings faced a problem that would crush most civilizations. For months at a time, the sun barely rose above the horizon. In the far north, it disappeared completely. Modern humans living in these conditions suffer from seasonal depression, vitamin D deficiency, and severe sleep disorders. The Vikings not only survived these conditions, they used them to their advantage. The key was in how they prepared for sleep each night. This wasn't just about lying down and closing their eyes. It was a carefully orchestrated ritual that began hours before bedtime. As the brief daylight faded, the longhouse transformed into a sleep preparation center. The central fire was built up with specific types of wood: oak for steady, long-burning heat, birch for quick warmth when needed, pine for its calming scent that helped people relax. But the most important element was the stones. River stones were placed in the fire and heated until they glowed red-hot. Then, using wooden tongs, these stones were carefully wrapped in thick wool cloth and placed at the foot of each sleeping area. This created hours of gentle, radiating warmth that kept feet and legs comfortable all night long. Modern thermal analysis shows these heated stones maintained temperatures of 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 6 hours. They were nature's version of an electric blanket, but better. The gradual cooling mimicked the body's natural temperature drop during sleep, promoting deeper rest. The sleeping surfaces themselves were engineering marvels. Multiple layers of different materials created a system that modern outdoor gear companies are still trying to match. The bottom layer was thick wooden planks, sometimes covered with woven mats. This provided firm support and insulation from the cold ground below. On top of this went layers of wool cloth, woven in specific patterns that trapped warm air while allowing moisture to escape. The middle layer was often stuffed with soft materials. Sheep's wool was most common, but wealthy families used down from ducks or geese. This created a cushioning effect that modern mattress makers spend millions trying to replicate. The top layer was where the Vikings' true genius showed. Instead of a single heavy blanket, they used multiple animal furs of different types. Sheepskin against the body for softness, bear fur for insulation, sealskin for waterproofing when needed. Each layer served a specific purpose. Together, they created a sleep system that kept people warm, dry, and comfortable in conditions that would challenge modern survival experts. But staying warm was only part of the challenge. The Vikings also had to deal with something modern people rarely think about: complete isolation from the outside world for months at a time. When winter storms hit, a longhouse might be cut off from other settlements for weeks. 80 people living in close quarters with no escape, no privacy, and no way to leave. This should have been a recipe for conflict and madness. Instead, the Vikings turned it into an advantage. The enforced togetherness created powerful social bonds. Families who might have drifted apart during busy summer months reconnected during long winter nights. Children learned skills from elders. Young adults heard stories that preserved their culture and history. The shared sleeping arrangements played a crucial role in this social bonding. When people sleep near each other night after night, their bodies synchronize in ways that promote cooperation and reduce aggression. Stress hormones balance out. Social hierarchies stabilize. Conflicts decrease. Archaeological evidence supports this. Analysis of skeletal remains from Viking-age settlements shows remarkably low levels of violence during winter months. Injuries from fights or weapons are rare. Most damage comes from accidents or normal wear and tear. Compare this to modern isolation studies. When researchers put groups of people in confined spaces for extended periods, conflict usually increases over time. Stress levels rise. Mental health problems develop. Sleep quality deteriorates. The Vikings experienced the opposite effect. Their sleep system created a positive feedback loop. Better sleep led to better social relationships. Better relationships led to lower stress. Lower stress led to even better sleep. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Viking sleep culture was how they used their wakeful hours. During the midnight wake period, the longhouse became a center of learning and planning. This was when important decisions were made. Problems were solved. Stories were told that would be remembered for generations. The soft light from bank coals created an atmosphere perfect for deep thinking. Without the distractions of daylight and daily work, minds could focus on complex problems. Archaeological evidence suggests many of the Vikings' greatest innovations and strategies were developed during these quiet nighttime hours. Runic inscriptions found in sleeping areas often reference night wisdom and dark counsel. These weren't superstitions. They were acknowledgments that the human brain works differently in the quiet darkness of night. Modern neuroscience has proven that the same brain states the Vikings achieved naturally can enhance creativity, memory formation, and problem-solving abilities. The midnight wake period also served practical purposes. Night guards could be changed without fully waking the entire household. Sick children could be tended to quietly. Pregnant women could give birth with the help of other women, while most of the longhouse slept peacefully. All of these activities happened in whispers and soft movements. The art of moving quietly in shared sleeping spaces was taught from childhood. Even the youngest children learned to control their movements and voices during the night hours. This created an atmosphere of mutual respect and consideration that extended far beyond sleep time. The social skills learned in the longhouse carried over into all aspects of Viking life. As winter slowly gave way to spring, the sleep patterns would gradually adjust. The heated stones were used less frequently. Fewer furs were needed. The midnight wake periods became shorter and less common. But the bonds formed during those long, dark nights lasted year-round. Families, clans, and entire communities emerged from winter stronger and more unified than when they entered it. This wasn't just survival. It was optimization. The Vikings had taken the harshest conditions on Earth and turned them into a source of strength. Modern sleep science is finally beginning to understand what the Vikings knew instinctively. The best sleep doesn't come from fighting our environment or isolating ourselves from others. It comes from working with natural rhythms and building strong social connections. The Viking sleep system worked so well that it might have been one of their greatest competitive advantages. Well-rested warriors fight better. Alert sailors navigate more safely. Healthy communities can support larger populations and more ambitious projects. While other medieval people struggled through winter, barely surviving until spring, the Vikings used those months to rest, plan, and prepare for their next conquests. When the sailing season returned, they emerged refreshed and ready to explore new lands, establish new settlements, and build their remarkable civilization. Their sleep wasn't just rest. It was preparation for greatness. What if everything you know about sleep is wrong because of one man with a cross? In the year 1000 CE, King Olaf Tryggvason stood on the deck of his warship, watching smoke rise from burning longhouses across Norway. But he wasn't destroying Viking homes to conquer them. He was destroying their way of life to save their souls. Olaf had converted to Christianity, and he believed the old Viking sleep practices were sinful. Families sleeping together? Ungodly. Waking up in the middle of the night for quiet conversations? Devil worship. The communal life that had made Vikings the strongest people in Europe? An offense against God. Within 50 years, a 1,000-year-old sleep system would be nearly extinct. The Christian conversion of Scandinavia wasn't just about changing religions. It was about changing how people lived, ate, worked, and especially how they slept. Missionaries from England and Germany brought more than Bibles. They brought new ideas about privacy, morality, and what it meant to be civilized. Archbishop Ansgar of Hamburg-Bremen wrote harsh words about Viking sleep habits in 849 CE. These Northmen sleep as beasts in herds, rising in darkness to perform unholy rites. To Christian eyes, the Viking way of sleeping looked primitive and immoral. The new faith demanded individual beds, private chambers, and uninterrupted sleep through the night. Wealthy converts built separate bedrooms. Poor families hung cloth dividers in their homes to create individual sleeping spaces. The great communal sleeping halls were abandoned or divided into smaller rooms. At first, many Vikings resisted these changes. Hallger Hoskuld's daughter, a powerful woman mentioned in the Laxdæla saga, refused to change her household's sleeping arrangements despite pressure from Christian neighbors. She kept the old ways until her death, the saga records, and her people were known for their strength and long life. But resistance was dangerous. King Olaf and later Christian rulers didn't just encourage conversion. They enforced it. Families who clung to the old sleep practices could lose their land, their status, or even their lives. The change happened faster than anyone expected. Within 2 generations, most Scandinavian households had adopted Christian sleep practices. The great longhouses were torn down or converted into churches. The raised sleeping platforms were replaced with individual beds. The carefully designed thermal zones were abandoned for private rooms that were often cold and uncomfortable. Archaeological evidence tells the story of this dramatic shift. Excavations of settlements from the 11th and 12th centuries show a clear break from earlier Viking patterns. Instead of communal sleeping areas, archaeologists find evidence of individual sleeping chambers, often poorly heated and inadequately ventilated. More importantly, the skeletal remains tell a darker story. Human bones from post-conversion settlements show increased signs of sleep disorders, seasonal depression, and vitamin D deficiency. Average lifespans dropped. Evidence of malnutrition increased. Even the teeth show changes that suggest poorer overall health. Dr. Soren Sindbeek of Aarhus University has studied this transition for over a decade. When they abandoned their communal sleep practices, he explains, they lost more than tradition. They lost their biological advantage. The midnight wake period, which had been central to Viking problem-solving and social bonding, was now seen as evidence of demonic possession. Christian doctrine taught that good people slept through the night without waking. Anyone who experienced natural biphasic sleep was encouraged to pray for forgiveness and fight against these unnatural urges. This created a vicious cycle. People who tried to suppress their natural wake periods experienced increased anxiety and stress. Their sleep quality deteriorated. Their physical and mental health suffered. But instead of recognizing these problems as caused by fighting natural sleep patterns, Christian leaders blamed them on insufficient faith or demonic influence. The herbs that Vikings had used for centuries to promote better sleep were now considered witchcraft. Lavender, chamomile, and meadowsweet were associated with pagan rituals and banned from sleeping areas. Instead, people were encouraged to pray before sleep and trust in God for rest. Even the basic design of sleeping spaces changed in ways that harmed health. Individual beds were often placed directly on cold floors, losing the thermal benefits of raised platforms. Private rooms couldn't maintain the stable temperatures that communal spaces had provided. The social regulation of stress hormones that came from sleeping near family members was lost. Some communities found ways to preserve elements of the old system while appearing to conform to Christian demands. Monasteries in Norway and Iceland quietly adopted modified versions of Viking sleep practices. Monks slept in communal dormitories rather than individual cells. They maintained scheduled wake periods for nighttime prayers that served the same function as the old midnight gatherings. But these adaptations were exceptions. Most of Scandinavia lost its sleep advantage within a century of conversion. The economic effects were immediate and measurable. Viking raids, which had terrorized Europe for 3 centuries, began to decline after 1050 CE. Historians usually credit this to better European defenses or political changes in Scandinavia. But the timing suggests another factor: sleep-deprived Vikings weren't as effective at warfare, navigation, or the complex planning that successful raids required. Trade also suffered. Viking merchants had dominated northern European commerce for generations, partly because they could function effectively in harsh conditions that exhausted their competitors. As their sleep advantage disappeared, so did their competitive edge in long-distance trading. The exploration that had taken Vikings to America, Iceland, and Greenland slowed dramatically after conversion. The energy, alertness, and social coordination needed for these ambitious voyages were casualties of the new sleep patterns. But perhaps the most tragic loss was cultural. The midnight wake periods had been when Vikings told stories, shared knowledge, and made important decisions. These quiet nighttime hours were when their oral traditions were passed down, their laws were debated, and their greatest plans were conceived. When Christian conversion eliminated these gatherings, it didn't just change how Vikings slept. It changed how they thought, planned, and remembered their past. The sophisticated culture that had produced great poetry, complex legal systems, and remarkable technological innovations began to fade. The irony is that many Christian practices actually worked against the sleep quality that their own doctrine promoted. By isolating people during sleep, eliminating natural wake periods, and forbidding helpful herbs, the new religion made it harder for converts to achieve the peaceful rest that should have been a blessing from God. Some Christian leaders eventually recognized these problems. By the 13th century, monastic rules in Scandinavia had quietly incorporated many elements of the old Viking sleep system. But by then, the damage was done. The general population had lost the knowledge and social structures that had made the Viking sleep system so effective. The conversion of Scandinavia to Christianity brought many benefits. It connected the region to the broader European world, introduced literacy, and established institutions that lasted for centuries. But it also destroyed one of humanity's most effective approaches to healthy sleep. Modern sleep researchers studying this period are amazed by what was lost. Dr. Roger Kirch, who has extensively studied pre-industrial sleep patterns, calls the destruction of Viking sleep culture one of history's greatest public health disasters. The Vikings had spent centuries perfecting a sleep system that worked in harmony with human biology and a natural environment. In just a few generations, that knowledge was almost completely erased. What replaced it was a system based on moral beliefs rather than practical effectiveness. The consequences extended far beyond Scandinavia. As Viking influence declined, so did the spread of their sleep innovations. Other cultures that might have adopted and improved upon these practices never got the chance. The medieval world became a place where most people slept poorly, suffered from seasonal depression, and never reached their full potential for rest and recovery. It would take nearly 1,000 years for science to rediscover what the Vikings had known instinctively about optimal sleep. In a laboratory in Copenhagen, something impossible was happening. Modern volunteers were sleeping better than they had in years, and all it took was pretending to be Vikings. Dr. E.U.'s Van Simmeren couldn't believe the results. For 3 weeks, his research team had recreated authentic Viking sleeping conditions in a controlled environment. Communal sleeping arrangements, natural darkness cycles, organic bedding materials, even the biphasic sleep pattern with midnight wake periods. The changes in the volunteers were dramatic and immediate. Within just 7 days, cortisol levels dropped by 40%. Melatonin production increased by over 300%. Cognitive test scores improved across every measured category. Participants reported feeling more rested, more alert, and more emotionally balanced than they had felt in years. The Vikings weren't just surviving their environment. Dr. Van Simmeren realized they had optimized human sleep in ways we're only beginning to understand. This experiment, conducted in 2019, was part of a growing movement among sleep researchers to look backward for solutions to modern sleep problems. What they were discovering challenged everything the medical establishment believed about healthy rest. The midnight wake period, dismissed for centuries as a sleep disorder, turned out to be crucial for memory consolidation and creative problem-solving. Brain scans of volunteers following the Viking sleep pattern showed increased activity in regions associated with learning, innovation, and emotional regulation. Dr. Matthew Walker, one of the world's leading sleep researchers, Put simply, we've been fighting our own biology for 1,000 years. The Vikings worked with it, and the results speak for themselves. But the most shocking discovery came from genetic analysis of preserved Viking remains. DNA samples extracted from teeth and bones revealed something extraordinary. Many Vikings had evolved enhanced sensitivity to melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep cycles. This genetic adaptation allowed them to produce more melatonin in response to darkness and to maintain healthy sleep patterns even during the extreme light variations of Nordic seasons. The trait appears to have developed over hundreds of generations as a response to the challenging Arctic environment. Even more remarkably, this genetic variant still exists today. Up to 15% of modern Scandinavian populations carry genes that make them naturally better at sleeping in conditions of extreme seasonal light variation. They are the biological descendants of the Viking sleep masters. Dr. Kari Stephenson, founder of the genetics company Decode, has been studying these inherited traits. The Vikings didn't just have better sleep practices, he explains. They were literally evolving into better sleepers. Natural selection favored those who could rest effectively in harsh conditions. This discovery has huge implications for understanding why some people struggle more with sleep disorders than others. Those without the Viking genetic variants may be fighting an uphill battle against their own biology when they try to sleep in ways that work for their ancestors. Modern sleep medicine is finally starting to incorporate lessons from Viking sleep culture. Clinics in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark now offer what they call ancestral sleep therapy. Instead of prescribing medications or expensive equipment, they teach patients to recreate elements of the Viking sleep system. The results are impressive. Patients learn to embrace darkness rather than fight it. They practice controlled wake periods instead of trying to sleep straight through the night. Some clinics even offer group sleeping arrangements for people who live alone and struggle with sleep anxiety. Dr. Inger Rosenvinge, who runs one of these programs in Bergen, Norway, has seen remarkable success rates. We're not asking people to live like Vikings, she explains. We're asking them to sleep like Vikings. There's a big difference. The program teaches participants to create optimal temperature zones in their bedrooms, use natural materials for bedding, and develop pre-sleep rituals that prepare the body and mind for rest. Most importantly, it helps people understand that some sleep patterns they've been told are disorders are actually natural and healthy. But perhaps the most powerful element is the social component. Group sessions help participants understand how isolation affects sleep quality. Many people discover that their sleep problems are really social problems in disguise. The success of these programs has caught the attention of sleep researchers worldwide. Studies are now underway in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom to test whether Viking-inspired sleep practices can help with everything from insomnia to seasonal depression to ADHD. Early results are promising. Children with attention disorders show dramatic improvement when their families adopt communal bedtime routines and controlled wake periods. Adults with chronic insomnia often see better results from Viking-style sleep practices than from traditional sleep medications. The military has also taken notice. Special forces units in several countries are experimenting with communal sleeping arrangements and biphasic sleep schedules for missions in challenging environments. The goal is to create the same resilience and group cohesion that made Viking warriors so formidable. Even technology companies are getting involved. Some firms now offer Viking sleep pods, communal resting areas where employees can nap together during work hours. The pods use natural materials, controlled lighting, and even heated stones to recreate elements of the longhouse experience. The irony is not lost on researchers that humanity's most advanced sleep solutions are coming from its most ancient practices. Dr. Walker notes, "We spent centuries trying to improve on what the Vikings had already perfected. We added complexity, technology, and individual isolation. All of it made sleep worse, not better. But recreating Viking sleep practices in the modern world isn't without challenges. Most people live in individual homes or apartments that weren't designed for communal sleeping. Urban noise and light pollution make it difficult to achieve the natural darkness cycles that were crucial to Viking success. Cultural barriers are even more significant. 1,000 years of Christian influence has made individual sleep seem not just normal, but morally necessary. Many people feel uncomfortable with the idea of sharing sleep spaces, even with family members. Yet the evidence keeps mounting that the Viking approach was superior. Longitudinal studies following people who adopt elements of the Viking sleep system show sustained improvements in physical health, mental well-being, and cognitive performance. Perhaps most importantly, these studies reveal something the Vikings understood instinctively. Sleep isn't just about individual rest. It's about community health. When groups of people sleep well together, they form stronger social bonds, experience less conflict, and achieve better collective outcomes. This insight is driving new research into everything from family therapy to workplace productivity. If the Vikings were right that communal sleep creates stronger communities, then our modern emphasis on individual bedrooms and private rest might be undermining the social fabric that holds society together. The Viking sleep legacy isn't just about getting better rest. It's about rediscovering ways of living that prioritize collective well-being over individual convenience. In an age of increasing isolation and mental health problems, that might be exactly what humanity needs. As researchers continue to unlock the secrets of Viking sleep mastery, one thing becomes clear. Our ancestors weren't primitive people who happened to sleep well. They were sophisticated sleep scientists who had solved problems we're still struggling with today. The darkness that once covered Scandinavia for months at a time wasn't their enemy. It was their teacher. And the lessons it taught them about rest, community, and human resilience are more relevant now than ever before. In the end, the Vikings conquered more than just lands across 3 continents. They conquered the night itself, turning humanity's most vulnerable hours into a source of strength. That conquest continues today, one good night's sleep at a time. A Silicon Valley executive pays $50,000 for a week-long sleep retreat, where she sleeps on wooden planks with strangers, wakes up every night at 2 a.m., and has never felt better in her life. A Navy SEAL team trains for Arctic missions by practicing Viking communal sleep techniques in freezing conditions. A family in Minnesota saves their marriage by sleeping together in one room like their Scandinavian ancestors did 1,000 years ago. How did ancient sleep wisdom become the hottest trend in modern wellness? The answer started with a surprising discovery in 2018. Dr. Matthias Bassner, a sleep researcher at the University of Pennsylvania, was studying sleep problems among astronauts on the International Space Station. Despite having the most advanced sleep technology available, astronauts consistently reported poor rest, anxiety, and decreased cognitive performance during long missions. Then someone suggested they try Viking sleep principles. The idea seemed ridiculous. How could medieval sleeping practices help with space-age problems? But Dr. Bassner was desperate enough to try anything. Working with NASA engineers, he created a modified Viking sleep system for the space station. Astronauts began sleeping in closer proximity to each other. They practiced controlled wake periods during their artificial night cycles. They used natural scents and materials whenever possible. Most importantly, they started treating sleep as a communal activity rather than an individual one. The results were immediate and dramatic. Sleep quality improved by 60%. Anxiety levels dropped. Cognitive test scores increased. Team cohesion strengthened significantly. The astronauts reported feeling more rested and alert than they had since arriving in space. Word of this success spread quickly through the scientific community. If Viking sleep principles could work in the ultimate artificial environment of space, they could work anywhere. Dr. Sarah Mednick at UC Riverside decided to test the principles on Earth. She recruited volunteers suffering from chronic insomnia and taught them to recreate Viking sleep conditions in their own homes. The participants learned to sleep with family members instead of alone. They practiced biphasic sleep with intentional midnight wake periods. They used heated stones and natural bedding materials. After just 2 weeks, 80% of participants reported significant improvement in their sleep quality. Many said it was the best rest they'd had in years. But the most interesting change wasn't in how they slept. It was in how they felt about their families and communities. Sleeping together changed our relationships, explained Jennifer Martinez, a study participant from San Diego. My teenage daughter and I had been fighting constantly. When we started sharing a sleeping space, we began talking again. Not during the day, but during those quiet midnight hours. It saved our family. This unexpected social benefit caught researchers' attention. The Vikings hadn't just created a superior sleep system. They had created a superior social system that used sleep as its foundation. Dr. Robin Dunbar, the evolutionary psychologist famous for Dunbar's number, became fascinated by the Viking sleep model. His research team studied how communal sleeping affects social bonding in modern families. They found that families who adopted Viking-style sleep practices showed increased empathy, better communication, and stronger emotional connections. Sleep is when we're most vulnerable, Dr. Dunbar explained. When we choose to be vulnerable together, it creates trust and intimacy that carries over into waking life. The Vikings understood this instinctively. The implications extend far beyond individual families. Researchers began studying how Viking sleep principles could address larger social problems. Could communal sleeping help reduce the epidemic of loneliness affecting modern society? Could it improve outcomes in nursing homes, military units, or even prisons? Early experiments were encouraging. A nursing home in Minnesota introduced Viking-inspired sleeping arrangements for residents who wanted to participate. Instead of isolated rooms, small groups of elderly residents shared larger spaces with multiple beds. Night staff facilitated quiet social time during natural wake periods. The results exceeded all expectations. Incidents of depression and anxiety dropped by 40%. Medical emergencies decreased. Most remarkably, cognitive decline slowed in residents with early-stage dementia. The social stimulation and emotional security of communal sleeping seemed to protect brain function in ways that individual care could not. Military applications proved equally promising. Special operations units began training with Viking sleep systems for missions in harsh environments. Teams that slept together showed better coordination, faster decision-making, and stronger unit cohesion than those using traditional individual sleeping arrangements. It's not just about the physical rest, explains Sergeant Major James Wilson, who helped design the military program. It's about trust. When you sleep next to someone night after night, you develop an instinctive awareness of their presence, their breathing, their movements. In combat situations, that awareness can save lives. But perhaps the most surprising application came from the corporate world. Technology companies, facing epidemics of burnout and mental health problems among employees, began experimenting with Viking-inspired workplace sleep programs. Google installed communal nap pods based on Viking longhouse designs. Facebook created quiet spaces where employees could practice biphasic sleep during long workdays. Some startups went even further, offering residential programs where employees could live and sleep together in Viking-style communities. The business results were impressive. Companies that implemented Viking sleep principles saw reduced sick leave, improved creativity, and better teamwork. Employee satisfaction scores increased significantly. Turnover rates dropped. "We thought we were just improving sleep," said Dr. Ariana Huffington, founder of Thrive Global, which has become a major advocate for Viking sleep principles. "What we discovered is that we were rebuilding human community in the workplace." The success stories multiplied rapidly. A treatment center for addiction began using Viking sleep practices to help patients recover. The communal sleeping arrangements provided emotional support during the most difficult parts of withdrawal and recovery. Relapse rates dropped by 30%. Schools started pilot programs teaching children Viking sleep principles. Students who participated showed improved attention, better emotional regulation, and stronger peer relationships. Test scores increased, but more importantly, incidents of bullying and social isolation decreased. Even hospitals began adopting elements of the Viking system. Maternity wards found that new mothers recovered faster when they shared sleeping spaces with other new mothers instead of staying in individual rooms. The mutual support and shared experience of nighttime baby care created informal networks that continued long after discharge. The growing body of research revealed something profound about human nature. Modern society's emphasis on individual privacy and personal space might be working against fundamental human needs for community and connection. The Vikings had structured their entire civilization around these needs, and their superior health and social cohesion were the results. Dr. Robert Waldinger, director of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, began incorporating Viking sleep research into his famous longitudinal study of human happiness. His preliminary findings suggested that people who adopted communal sleeping practices reported higher life satisfaction and stronger relationships than those who maintained individual sleeping arrangements. The Vikings may have discovered one of the keys to human flourishing, Dr. Waldinger observed. Not just physical health, but social and emotional well-being. They understood that sleep isn't just about the individual. It's about the community. This insight was driving a fundamental shift in how researchers approach sleep medicine. Instead of focusing solely on individual sleep disorders, they began studying sleep as a social phenomenon. How did sleeping alone affect mental health? Could communal sleeping help treat depression and anxiety? Were some sleep problems really symptoms of social isolation? The answers were pointing toward a revolutionary conclusion. The Vikings hadn't just been better sleepers. They had been better at being human. As word of these discoveries spread through social media and popular culture, demand for Viking sleep experiences exploded. Retreat centers offering authentic Viking sleeping experiences began appearing across North America and Europe. Waiting lists stretched for months. But the real revolution was happening quietly in homes around the world. Families were rediscovering the joy of sleeping together. Parents were sharing bedrooms with children again. Adult siblings were choosing to sleep in the same spaces during family visits. Even strangers were forming sleep communities, sharing homes specifically to recreate the communal rest that had made Vikings so resilient. The ancient wisdom was spreading, one family at a time, one community at a time. The Vikings' greatest conquest was finally complete. The last Viking died in 1263 at the Battle of Largs, or so historians thought. But in a small village in northern Iceland, 89-year-old Sigrid Eriksdottir still sleeps the way her ancestors did 8 centuries ago. Every night, she shares her bed with her granddaughter, her great-grandson, and whoever else in the family needs warmth and comfort. At 2 a.m., they wake naturally, talk quietly about dreams and worries, then return to sleep until dawn. Sigrid has never owned a prescription sleep medication. She's never needed one. My grandmother taught me, and her grandmother taught her, Sigrid explains in accented English. We never stopped sleeping the old way. Why would we? It works. Sigrid represents something scientists thought was extinct, an unbroken chain of Viking sleep wisdom passed down through generations. Her family is one of perhaps a dozen in Iceland that never fully adopted individual sleeping practices, even during the strongest periods of Christian conversion. Dr. Helgi Mar Gunnlaugsson of the University of Iceland has been studying these holdout families for over a decade. What he's discovered challenges fundamental assumptions about genetics, culture, and human adaptation. These families have maintained not just the practices, Dr. Gunnlaugsson explains, but the biological advantages that made Viking sleep so effective. They show genetic markers for enhanced melatonin sensitivity at rates 3 times higher than the general population. The implications are staggering. Natural selection had favored the Viking sleep genes for over 1,000 years. But when most of Scandinavia abandoned communal sleeping practices, these genetic advantages became dormant or even disappeared from many family lines. The holdout families prove that the genes still exist. More importantly, they prove that the practices still work. Researchers from around the world now travel to Iceland to study these living examples of Viking sleep culture. The families have become unwitting ambassadors for an ancient way of life that modern science is desperately trying to understand and recreate. But Sigrid's family isn't unique anymore. As word of their lifestyle spreads, other families are emerging from hiding. A clan in northern Norway, several families in the Faroe Islands, even some groups in Minnesota and Wisconsin, descendants of 19th century Scandinavian immigrants who quietly maintain the old sleeping ways. These discoveries are fueling a growing movement that researchers call sleep archaeology, the systematic search for surviving elements of pre-industrial sleep cultures. Teams are now documenting traditional sleep practices among indigenous groups worldwide, from the Inuit of Greenland to the Sami of Lapland. What their findings suggest that the Vikings weren't unique. Many traditional cultures had developed sophisticated communal sleep systems. But most of these practices were destroyed by colonization, modernization, or religious conversion. The surviving examples are precious windows into humanity's sleep heritage. Dr. Carol Worthman of Emory University has become a leading voice in this field. Her research team has documented traditional sleep practices among dozens of cultures. The Western model of individual sleep in private bedrooms is actually the historical anomaly, she explains. For most of human history, people slept together in groups. The Vikings just perfected it. This research is driving a fundamental reconsideration of what constitutes healthy sleep. Medical schools are beginning to teach about communal sleep benefits. Sleep clinics are experimenting with group therapy approaches. Even pharmaceutical companies are investing in research on social sleep solutions rather than just individual medications. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated these trends in unexpected ways. As families spent months isolated together in their homes, many rediscovered the benefits of closer sleeping arrangements. Parents who had sent children to separate bedrooms found that the whole family slept better when they stayed together. Post-pandemic surveys revealed that up to 30% of families had adopted some form of communal sleeping during lockdowns. Many continued these practices even after restrictions lifted. The crisis had forced a natural experiment in Viking-style family sleeping, and the results were overwhelmingly positive. Dr. Wendy Troxel, a sleep researcher at RAND Corporation, documented these changes in her landmark study, Pandemic Sleep Patterns. She found that families practicing communal sleep during lockdowns showed lower rates of anxiety, depression, and sleep disorders than those maintaining individual sleeping arrangements. The pandemic accidentally recreated some of the social conditions that made Viking sleep so effective, Dr. Troxel observed. Extended family time, shared spaces, natural wake-sleep cycles without commute schedules. Many families discovered they felt better sleeping together than apart. This accidental rediscovery is now informing intentional programs worldwide. The government of Denmark has launched a national initiative to promote ancestral sleep health based on Viking principles. Schools teach children about traditional sleep practices alongside modern sleep hygiene. Healthcare providers receive training in communal sleep benefits. The results are already visible in Danish health statistics. Prescription sleep medication use has dropped by 15% since the program began. Reports of seasonal affective disorder have decreased. Even crime rates show improvement in communities that have embraced communal sleep practices. Other Nordic countries are following suit. Norway has integrated Viking sleep education into its national healthcare system. Sweden is conducting the world's largest controlled study of communal versus individual sleep arrangements. Finland is training healthcare workers to recognize when sleep problems might be solved by social solutions rather than medical ones. But the movement extends far beyond Scandinavia. Sleep centers in Japan are experimenting with traditional communal sleeping practices from their own culture. African researchers are documenting indigenous sleep customs that share similarities with Viking practices. Native American communities are reviving traditional sleeping arrangements that emphasize family and tribal bonds. The common thread connecting all these diverse traditions is the recognition that sleep is not just a biological function. It's a social one. The modern world's emphasis on individual privacy during sleep may be undermining one of humanity's most fundamental needs for community and connection. This realization is driving changes in architecture and urban planning. Some new housing developments are designed specifically to facilitate communal sleeping arrangements. Apartments include large family sleeping rooms alongside individual bedrooms. Community centers offer shared sleeping spaces for residents who live alone. The technology industry is also adapting. Sleep tracking apps now include features for monitoring family sleep patterns. Smart home systems can optimize temperature and lighting for communal sleeping arrangements. Some companies are even developing AI assistants specifically designed to facilitate healthy family sleep routines. But perhaps the most significant change is cultural. The stigma once associated with family members sharing sleep spaces is rapidly disappearing. Social media is full of families proudly sharing their Viking-inspired sleeping arrangements. Celebrities openly discuss sleeping with their children or parents for better rest and stronger bonds. Dr. James McKenna, a leading researcher on family sleep patterns, believes this cultural shift represents a return to human biological norms. We evolved to sleep in groups, he explains. The nuclear family sleeping in separate rooms is a recent invention that goes against millions of years of human evolution. The Vikings understood our true nature better than we do. As research continues to validate the benefits of Viking sleep practices, one question remains. Will modern society be brave enough to fully embrace these ancient lessons? The answer may depend on people like Sigrid Eriksdotter and her family. By maintaining their traditional practices through centuries of change, they've preserved more than just sleeping customs. They preserved a way of being human that prioritizes community, connection, and collective well-being. Every night, as Sigrid settles into bed with her family, she continues a tradition that stretches back over 1,000 years. The same darkness that once covered Viking longhouses now covers her small home in Iceland. The same trust that allowed Viking families to sleep peacefully together still guides her family's rest. In the morning, they wake refreshed and ready to face another day, just as their ancestors did, just as humans were meant to do. The Vikings' conquest of the night continues, one family at a time, one peaceful sleep at a time. Their greatest victory wasn't won with swords or ships. It was won with something far more powerful, the simple act of choosing to rest together rather than apart. In the end, that choice may be humanity's path back to the deep, restorative sleep that our ancestors enjoyed. The sleep that made Vikings not just great warriors and explorers, but great humans. The darkness is no longer humanity's enemy. Thanks to the Vikings, it has become our greatest teacher.